Okay, folks. So in the first part, you learned about the eutectoid reactions and the resulting microstructures. In fact, you also calculated amounts of different microconstituents, and I hope you enjoyed it. Uh, it may be covered in 304, 305, maybe next week. Now, in the second part of this video, we are going to learn how to prepare the specimen metallographically so that we can look at different microstructural features. And then in the third part, we are going to do the microstructural analysis. Obviously, to prepare the specimen takes a long time. So even though I have condensed the video as much as possible, I still wanted you to see some of the problems that may arise, and Mr. Humphrey is going to show you how to fix them. So what we learned in the first part, that in slowly cooled plain carbon steels, if we start with a eutectoid steel, all of the austenite converts into this two-phase microconstituent called pearlite. Pearlite is composed of 89% ferrite and 11% cementite. On the other hand, if we take off eutectoid compositions, say hypoeutectoid steel, in hypoeutectoid steel, which is to the left of eutectoid point, the alloy composition is less than 0.76%. So whatever was austenite at high temperature, whatever was the composition of this alloy, since it passes through the ferrite phase before reaching the eutectoid temperature, we have pro-eutectoid ferrite, and the remaining austenite converts to pearlite. And the composition of pro-eutectoid ferrite remains 0.022 and pearlite remains 0.76. If, on the other hand, our alloy composition is more than eutectoid, that means it is hyper-eutectoid steel, having higher than 0.76% carbon. Then at high temperature austenite, whatever is the composition of the alloy, since upon cooling it passes through the cementite phase before reaching the eutectoid temperature, so some of the austenite transforms to the cementite and rest becomes pearlite. So of course cementite has composition 6.7% and pearlite has composition 0.76%. So this is just doing mass balance or what is called materials balance. Now let's look at this pearlite structure. This pearlite structure is a very interesting structure because it is a two-phase microconstituents. It is made up of alternating layers of ferrite and cementite. So alpha, and this is cementite. So remember, alpha is very soft because it's just like pure iron, whereas cementite is extremely hard. So what we are doing is when we have these alternating layers of alpha and Fe3C, this Fe3C cementite strengthens the ferrite by its dispersion because we are dispersing very fine layers of cementite. So remember, 89 to 11% means if this is 8 units long, then this is only 1 unit long. So we have 1 unit hard layer dispersion in a soft matrix. So this width, 1 layer of each, is called interlamellar distance, lambda. So what happens is if we decrease lambda, we make the dispersion finer, we increase the strength. And of course, the price we pay is inductivity. so ductility decreases. Now this lambda can be controlled. Now we did slow cooling, but we didn't need to do slow cooling only. So you are going to learn in your lecture something about continuous cooling curves. So you will find out lambda can be controlled by the temperature from where we cool it from and the cooling rate, how slow or fast we cool it. What we are seeing is the slowest cool, furnace cool. So our steel samples today, all samples were austenitized at temperature around 1000 degrees C for 4 hours and then furnace cooled. Furnace cooled means we just switch out the furnace, wait for a day to come for it to come back to room temperature. So we have a 1018 steel, which has got 0.18% carbon. We have 1045 steel, 0.45% carbon, and 1095 steel, 0.958% carbon. So we are going to mount them into bakelite pucks, and we are going to select black, green, red. Notice alphabetical order. Now, when we are heat treating the bar, of course, we need to make some kind of a mark so we can distinguish our bars. So we will have 1 notch in 1018, 2 notches in 1045, and 3 notches in 1095. So here are our as received bars. What we have done is we have put 1 notch, 2 notches, and 3 notches. And then we are going to put this in a furnace. And this is what they will look like. So you can see this one has 1 notch in it. Can't see it clearly under this camera, but I can see it with naked eye. And then what we are going to do is we are going to slice it off. You're going to see in the video, mount it, polish it, etch it, and then look under the microscope. So as I said, we have steel bars, 3 compositions, heated well above the eutectoid temperature, and then slow cooled to form ferrite, pearlite, etc. microstructures. Next, we are going to cut. The bar is small, penny-sized plate. Then we are going to mount it. So we use a abrasive mat cutoff wheel. We use this mounting press. And then for grinding and polishing, we are going to use a semi-automated system, and we are going to talk more about it in detail. So let's start with cutting this treated piece, heat treated piece.
This is our abrasive cutoff machine for cutting the discs off of the bar stock that we need to make our specimens. Here's an example of one of the bars, and we want to ideally cut a piece of bar stock the thickness of a nickel off of this bar. So we'll need to mount it in the vise, position it so that we get a good cut. Right? This is an example of a piece that is too thin compared to that nickel. Here's an example of a piece that's too thick. Now, too thick is not a problem for our mounting process, we're just wasting material. The main power switch for the cutoff machine is the big black knob on the back right here. We rotate that, we see the power indicator comes on, the light comes on in the chamber. The chamber itself will be locked as long as the power is not on. but now that we've turned the machine on, we can raise the lid up and we can start to install our specimen. The vices here are fixed in position where they need to be. They're simple quarter-turn cam-lock vices, and there is a diagonal cut slot in the face of each vise so that it grips the bar. So even when the vise is in its open position, they're just close enough together that the bar will rest in there, and we're going to bring this cam forward until it just lightly touches the vise, right? So we get just a tiny bit of resistance. That will hold the bar in place, but I can still reach in here and adjust its position side to side within the vise. So we've zoomed in on the vise. I place the bar, making sure that I don't cut the end with our identifying slots into this triangular slot. I bring the lever forward until I feel the slightest bit of resistance, and that will allow me to move the bar over to the left here and position it close to where I want the cut to be. Then I will reach around and bring down the cutting blade until it's almost touching the specimen, and now I can position the specimen for the cut. So we zoom in even closer now on the blade, looking right along the blade, and we can see that I've got the bar positioned so that the width of the blade to the left of the width of the specimen to the left of the blade is approximately the thickness of a nickel. Yeah, we don't have to be super precise here. We just want to make sure that we're not going to cut something that's too thin to be useful. Now that the bar is positioned, I'll lock the specimen in place and lift the motor back up out of the way so that we can prepare to make the cut. Our specimen is positioned. We're ready to make the cut. So I'm going to lower the hood in place. I need to verify over here that this knob directs the cooling flow, the lubricant flow. Right now it is set to blade. That is what I need. So the operation is extremely simple. I press start. And now I can see the coolant flow lubricating the blade, so I can now bring the blade down and start to make the cut. Once the blade makes contact with the specimen, some sparks are normal to see. I want to maintain just enough pressure on the lever, 5, maybe 10 pounds at most, just enough that I can feel that the lever is still moving. If I hear the motor start to bog down or the sparks get truly excessive, then I might generate so much heat that I will actually damage the specimen. It should take you on the order of 10 to 15 seconds to cut through the entire specimen. I've cut through the specimen. I lift the blade all the way back up, press stop. That stops the coolant flow pump and the blade, which has a brake on it. I can now lift open the hood, wait a few seconds for some of the liquid to drain away. While I'm waiting for that, I can release the vise and remove our specimen. There's a little basket in here that catches the specimen, and it's connected to this little rubber device here. Problem is, with this particular model of vise, they prevent the basket from being lifted all the way out. So we actually have to reach around from the other side and lift the basket to the rear. Slide it out. And here's our specimen. And that's pretty close to the thickness of a nickel. So now we'll put it on the card between the cutoff saw and the mounting press so that the mounting group can encase this in plastic. The last thing we need to do is to put this little basket back in, slide it back into that slot from behind, drop it back into place. Finally, after we've made all three cuts, we want to clean up after ourselves. So I'm going to turn this knob from blade clockwise over to nozzle, and we have a little gun here that now that the knob is on nozzle, pressing the start button on the hood up here will reactivate the pump but not the motor, and now I pull the trigger and it's just like a garden hose nozzle, and I can wash down the residue from the cut, because it's an abrasive blade, and so we get a lot of residue as the blade wears away. And we just want to flush all of that to the back of the chamber. When I'm done, make sure that I return that knob to the blade position, lower the hood back down, and turn the power off on the right-hand side.
Okay, so you saw Professor Humphrey cut off slices of each of these steel bars, 3 steel bars. Our next goal is to mount them in color-coded thermoset. It's Bakelite, using this mounting press, LECO LR36. So our goal is to end up with 3 specimens, mounted specimens like this. So here is Professor Humphrey again.
Okay, so now that the cutoff group has supplied us with our first specimen from the 1018 steel, we're ready to mount it in the plastic puck. Now you'll notice that there is a fairly good sized burr on this part. That's a natural part of the cutoff process. The only thing that we're really concerned about is that the cut looks relatively even and that there's no burn marks on it, which means that we had excessive heat during the cutting process. The burr doesn't concern us because we can bury the burr inside the plastic puck. We're going to put the opposite side face down on the ram so that that is the face that's exposed when we move on to our grinding and polishing process. So before we begin, we need to check that everything is ready to go with the machine here. So I've already turned on the circuit breaker on the back of the machine and turned on the water valves. So we simply need to turn the machine on right here. You see, it gives us the preset conditions. Preset conditions of 150 degrees C, 4,200 PSI, and 7 minutes. Those are the appropriate settings for our procedure. So the first thing is I'm going to press the ram up button to bring the ram up out of the cylinder. And I'm going to bring it up just high enough that I can see around the edge. And I want to just make sure that there's no plastic flash left on the sides of the piston from the previous procedure. This looks pretty clean, so we're okay to go. I'm also going to pull this knob here, pull that out, which will allow me to tilt back the head. And I want to check the perimeter of the upper ram for flash as well. That looks pretty clean. The last group did a good job cleaning it up when they were done. So I can pull this knob out, lower the head back into place, release the knob. To begin the process, just going to take my specimen, going to place it on the ram, center it just by eye as well as I can. We want it to be centered in our final specimen. And press the ram down button. Depending on where in the cycle you are, you may just be able to press the button once and it will go all the way to the bottom. This is typically what happens on the second and the third try. For the first try, I need to hold the button down until it gets to the bottom. We'll hear a slight change in the the note of the motor when it reaches the bottom. There. So the specimen's at the bottom, and we're ready to load the powder that will make the plastic puck. So I insert the funnel into the cylinder. For 1018, as you recall, we're color coding our specimens. So 1018 goes into a black puck, 1045 goes into green, 1095 goes into red. So here's my black powder. One full scoop of powder. So I gently pour that down the funnel. Right. Tap the funnel to make sure all the powder went down. And we're ready to proceed. I pull the cover forward, pull down on the handles. You can see it's in the open position, so we pull down and then rotate clockwise to the lock position. I pull down, takes a fair amount of force, rotate to the lock position, and we're ready to begin. We've already verified all the settings. Cooling is on automatic, so all we have to do is press run for the cycle. It will bring the temperature up to 150 degrees. Once the temperature reaches 150 degrees, then it will maintain the pressure accurately at 4,200 psi. As the temperature rises, it will maintain pressure, but it doesn't hold the tolerance tightly until we've actually reached our 150 degree temperature. Once we've reached 150 degrees C and 4,200 psi, then the 7-minute countdown will begin. When the 7-minute countdown is complete, you'll hear the cooling water start. When it first enters the chamber, it obviously boils on the surface that's 150 degrees C. When the temperature gets back down to 50 degrees C, we'll be ready to eject our specimen. So to begin the cycle, I just have to press run and wait. So it's raising the ram so that we can achieve some pressure. It's pushing the specimen up against the upper ram. You can see we have some pressure. Temperature is coming up. And now we wait. Okay. So the cooling water is stopped because the temperature got down to 50 degrees after the 7-minute countdown, and we're ready to release the specimen. So to release the specimen, you simply turn the handle back to the center position. You won't be able to lift this up because now there's a solid puck of plastic in there and there's too much vacuum to raise that by hand. So to raise it up, we simply press the ram up button once. That will bring the ram up enough to pop the upper ram loose. If you were to look right between here, we'd just be able to see the top of the puck. Push this back. Now you can see the very top surface of our puck. Press the ram up button one more time. It will bring the puck up to a height where we can remove it. So 50 degrees C is fairly warm, but safe enough to touch for a moment or so. And you can see now we have a fair bit of flash around the edge of the ram. So I'm going to start with this toothbrush and just try to scrape off, and you can see it's flaking off pretty easily here. Sometimes it comes off very easily with the toothbrush. Sometimes you have to resort to scraping it with the edge of an X-Acto knife. So we brush away that flash. Again, pull the knurled knob out to tip the upper ram back, and do the same thing around the edge of the upper ram. If you don't do the edge, the machine exerts enough force to move the lower ram, whether there's flash on it or not. But if you don't clean the upper ram of flash, you'll find it very difficult to lock the head in position for the next specimen. So everything's cleaned up. Brush away the bits with the toothbrush. Pull out the knurled knob to lower the head back, and we're ready to begin the next specimen.
Okay, now that we have 3 mounted specimens, next thing what we are going to do is we are going to round off these edges on each of these 3 samples using a belt polisher. Once we have rounded off the edges, then what we are going to do is first stage is grinding. We are going to use 3 different diamond discs to polish them, and that is what Professor Humphrey is going to show you in the next video.
So we've broken the edge on our specimens after they came out of the molding process, and we're ready to put them into the grinding machine. We have a Streuer's Tegrapol here to do the grinding. Has a magnetic turntable that we affix a disc with grinding media epoxied to it. We have a rotating head here that rotates the specimens in the opposite direction of the turntable in order to get them the most even grind possible. So the machine's already been switched on the back corner. The water valve is switched on. We're ready to install the first grinding disc. So the grinding discs are stored in the carousel here in the order that we're going to use them. So the top drawer is our coarse grinding disc. These gray areas are the epoxy containing a synthetic diamond grit. And we want to verify on the back that this is our 220. The first step is 220, the next stage is 600, and the final stage is 1200 grit grinding. The turntable's magnetic. The back of the disc is steel, but the back has a very rough surface. So we need to get it centered on the turntable as well as possible, because once it's attached, it will not slide. So the best way to do that is to space your fingers around the perimeter of the disc and use those as a guide to lower the disc straight onto the turntable. So I get my fingers all in contact with the turntable, slowly lower them, and the disc snaps into place, and I don't have an overhang of more than 1 millimeter on any side. Now I can lower the specimen mover head into position, load my specimens in face down one at a time. The grinding process is a wet process, so I need to aim the water nozzle at the center. And for the grinding, the settings on the display here should read speed 300 RPM, time 3 minutes, force 15 newtons, water on. If those don't match up, then we need to change them. And in this case, all right, I need to use the arrow keys, move it up to speed, press the enter key to select the 300 RPM. And we're ready to begin. All I need to do now is press the green start button and verify that the water flow is adequate. So the water should reach almost but not quite to the center of the disc, so I need to increase that water flow a little bit. And we're away on our first grinding step. Now when the first grinding step completes, we're going to rinse and dry the specimens, and we're going to inspect them. When they first come out of the molding process, frequently there's plastic flash that's covering part of the metal because the surface wasn't perfectly flat. We need to make sure that's ground away. We need to make sure that the metal surface is uniform and that we don't have any large scratches other than the ones from the grinding process itself. When the cycle is done, the machine beeps, lifts up the pistons that apply the force to the specimens. I can press backwards on this black handle here. When I do that, I need to keep a hand on top of the mover head. The spring is quite strong and it will slam upwards if you don't have your hand there to brace it. Push backwards to release. Let the head come all the way up. And now I'm going to take my specimens and I'm going to rinse them in the sink. And I don't even need to do that because I can clearly see that the surface on these two, the green and the red specimens, I still have some residual plastic, and the red specimen is clearly not flat yet. So it's clear that I need to repeat this first grinding step. So we'll just put the specimens right back in and press start to repeat the cycle. So after the second cycle on the coarsest grinding, all right, we're going to look at our specimens. I can clearly see that the green one isn't flat, nor is the red one. I can still see a significant depression there where the material has a completely different appearance. We want to repeat this first grinding step as many times as is necessary to get a good uniform surface, because that will give us the best results from the remainder of the steps. And this first grinding step is the only one that actually removes any significant amount of material. Okay, black specimen looks pretty good. The green specimen looks good except for this divot here, but it's relatively small. The rest of the surface looks really good, and we don't need 100% of the surface of the specimen to do our experiment. So I think that we can proceed with this, and we'll just have to avoid that portion of the surface of the specimen. And the same thing goes for the red specimen, that again we have an area where we had a divot in the surface from the cutoff process. The whole rest of the surface looks pretty good. So I think that we're okay to move forward. So I'm going to rinse these in the sink. All right, just to remove any residue, especially from grinding the plastic. That leaves a gummy residue. And just gently dry them off with a paper towel. At this stage of the process, it's still okay to touch the metal surface. Once we're finished with the grinding and prepare to move on to the polishing, it will no longer be safe to touch the metal surface. So that set is done, so we need to change the disc. So I move the water nozzle out of the way, lift the disc off, and again we get quite a bit of gummy residue from the plastic, so I'm going to rinse the disc in the sink as well. And I'm just going to gently rub in kind of a circular motion the surface of the disc as I rinse it to wash away the residue from the plastic. These discs are, it looks rusty, but it's not. These discs are of a steel alloy that is relatively immune to rust. So I just shake the excess water off of the disc and put it back into the carousel. Now we can proceed to the next step. So the next drawer down in the carousel is our 600 grit disc. Same principle as the previous disc. Again, install it on the turntable by spreading my fingers around the edge, using those to guide it down onto the turntable. Snaps into place. I don't have an overhang of more than 1 millimeter on any side. Lock the head in place. Put the specimens back in face down. Aim the water nozzle back toward the center. Quickly verify that our settings haven't changed. 300 RPM, 3 minutes, 15 newtons, water on, and press the start button. And somehow I managed to change the water flow, so I just need to adjust that slightly. Okay, you may notice that occasionally, if the specimen is wet on the back, it will stick to the piston, and when the unit is done and withdraws those pistons, it lifts the specimen up. That's just a minor annoyance. So now, the goal of having done that first grinding step several times is to minimize the chance that we need to do the remaining steps again. So I'm going to rinse these specimens in the sink. Again, very gently rub the surface to remove any extra plastic. And again, dry them gently with a paper towel. So the black specimen looks very good. Very fine scratches, all more or less in the same direction from the last few seconds of the grinding process. The green specimen doesn't look quite so good. I can see some significant scratches and a little bit of a band here. We already knew about the divot from the previous setting, but I'm a little bit concerned about our green specimen. And our red specimen, again, looks pretty good, except for the divot from the cutoff machine that we already knew about. So, although the goal of the previous grinding step was to not need to repeat these steps, it looks like I'm going to repeat this step just to even out the finish on our green specimen here. We'll put the specimens back in face down, and we'll repeat this step one more time, just to, again, as I said, even out the finish on the green specimen. Okay, so one more time we'll rinse our specimens. Dry them with a paper towel. Don't want to rub too hard on the surface of the metal, even though we're still in the grinding stage. And the only one I was concerned about was the green one, and this surface looks significantly better now. I can still see some large scratches, but it's much better than it was before. So I think we're okay to move forward. So once more, I will take the disc off of the turntable. Again, just to rinse off the residue from the plastic from the grinding process. Shake the excess water off, put it back in the carousel. Now at this point, I also notice that we're starting to get some buildup of plastic residue around the edge of the turntable itself. So since I have a damp paper towel from drying the specimens, I'm going to spin the turntable by hand and run the paper towel along the edge to clean off the residue from the plastic from the grinding. Now we can install our third grinding disc, our 1200 grit disc. All right, again, verify the grit number on the back of the disc. Use my fingers as a guide to put the disc in place. Load the specimens back in. Move the water nozzle back towards the center. Quickly verify the settings once more. 300 RPM, 3 minutes, 15 newtons, water on. We're good to go. Press the start button and again adjust the water flow so that it reaches almost but not quite to the very center of the disc. Okay, and we're ready to inspect our specimens after the last grinding step. One more time, rinsing them in the sink. Again, very gently rubbing to remove the residue from the plastic. And this time I'm going to dry them just by very gently wiping them across the surface of the paper towel rather than rubbing or patting, just to keep an even, gentle pressure on the surface. Okay, so our black specimen still looks very good. Our green specimen is looking better. And our red specimen looks like it has a bit of a water spot on it, but other than that, it's in pretty good shape. So we can remove the last grinding disc. Again, move the water nozzle out of the way, lift up the disc from one edge, bring it to the sink, and again, gently rub it to help wash away the residue of the plastic, which will gum up the grinding material and make the grinding process less effective. So again, shake the excess water off, put it back into the carousel.
Okay, now that we have ground these samples using wet diamond abrasive grinding discs, now we are going to use different polishing cloths with a diamond particle slurry. We will start with 9 micron, then move on to 3 micron, and our final finish would be 1 micron. Here is Professor Humphrey again.
So now that we've finished our grinding and we've verified that the specimens look pretty good, once more I'm going to take my damp paper towel. I'm going to wipe down the turntable to remove any residue, and in addition, I'm going to wipe the bottom of the mover plate just in case we got any residue on there. Now we can take out the first polishing disc right? We're on our fourth stage of this process. So the polishing disc is in bin number 4. As you can see, it looks completely different than the grinding discs. It may be difficult to see on camera, but this disc has a very slight texture. It looks kind of like microscopic corduroy. And that is to hold the diamond particles for the polishing in place, but not firmly like the epoxy on the grinding discs. We want the particles to be able to roll so that they don't actually tear away much material. For the first polishing process, we want the MD plan disc, so we verify that that is the disc we have. Place it on the turntable. Lower the head. Before I install the specimens, I need to install the dosing bottle for our diamond polishing slurry. So this bottle contains a gray liquid that has artificial diamond particles in it that on average have a diameter of 9 microns. On the back of the bottle there's a recess that fits onto this knob on the right hand side of the specimen mover head. If I swing the bottom of the dosing bottle out of the way, you can see there's an electronic connector here that fits into a matching one on the doser head. And that allows the base of the unit to control the dosing mechanism inside the bottle. So I swing the bottom out to the right to expose that connector. Place the bottle against the side of the doser head. The knob fits into the recess. Straight down, the bottle is installed. Bring the bottom back so that it is flush with the top. Now I need to check the display, and there's an extra line on the display. So now we read speed 150 RPM. It's recognized the presence of the doser bottle, recognizes that we're doing polishing instead of grinding. It's automatically lowered the speed from 300 to 150. The time is still 3 minutes, the force is 15 newtons. Again, it's recognized the presence of the doser bottle and automatically changed the water to off. But the doser number and doser level line is new. It is recognized that the code number, ID number for this bottle is number 4, and it currently has the level set to 10. So I need to use the arrow keys and the enter key and lower the doser level to 4. The particles are diamond, they don't wear out, but they do slowly get pushed off the edge of the disc. If we put too much on there, it will just increase the speed that it gets pushed off the end of the disc, and that's why a level of 10 is too much. By trial and error, we've figured out that a level of 4 is pretty much adequate. So I press enter to lock in that setting. Specimen bottles installed, settings fixed. Place the specimens face down on the polishing disc. And the last thing we do, we have this squirt bottle containing a green lubricant. For the grinding, the water served as a lubricant, coolant, and to flush away the residue from the grinding process. We don't have anything to serve that function for the polishing. The diamond slurry doesn't have enough liquid in it to serve that purpose. If we used enough, we would be really wasting material. So this color-coded green by the manufacturer to indicate that it's for this water-based process, and I'm just going to squirt a little bit of the lubricant onto the disc. As I press start, I want to watch the nozzle at the bottom of the dispenser carefully. Sometimes the tube will dry out when the dosers sit for a little while, and it may not dispense a drop of polishing material at the very beginning. If it does, we're fine. If it does not, we'll press this orange prime button here. Looks like a spray nozzle with a diamond in the spray. That will force the dispenser to put out 1 drop of material. If nothing happens when we hit it the first time, we do it again until we do get 1 drop of material onto the surface of the disc. So as I press start, I will lean down and watch that nozzle carefully. I did get a drop of material, and so the process is good to go. Okay, so this stage of the process when we're doing the polishing now, we have a different procedure for removing the specimens from the disc. So I'm going to raise the head, and I am not going to take all of the specimens off at once. At this point, we don't want to rinse the surface with just water, because water will leave stains on the metal surface. So after I rinse with water, I need to rinse with alcohol and then immediately dry it under an air dryer. So I will take the specimens off of the polishing disc plate one at a time, rinse them under running water without touching the metal surface, and then immediately rinse them with alcohol, which will displace all the water and also evaporate much faster than water off of the surface. So we'll take the first one off, rinse it under flowing water, and then as soon as I pull it out from underneath the water, I am going to hit it with the alcohol, rinse it thoroughly with alcohol, and then immediately put it under the specimen dryer. The only part I'm really worried about is getting the metal surface dry. The plastic we can worry about later. So now I'll remove the second specimen under the water, alcohol, dryer. Remove the third specimen, water, alcohol, dryer. Okay, I can inspect my specimens now. I can see some scratches on the black specimen, but overall it's looking pretty good. The green specimen, about the same, except for that divot that we have already decided to work around. And the same for red. So these specimens are good to go. So now I need to unload the doser bottle, swing the bottom out, lift straight up, bring the bottom back to flush, and replace it in its storage position. I want to put the polishing disc back. Again, the diamond grit does not wear out, so I don't want to rinse it off. I want to leave that material on the disc. So I'm going to very carefully lift the disc from the edges. I don't want to touch the top surface of the polishing discs if I can help it. And I am just going to put it directly back into its storage place. Okay, there's quite a bit of residue both from the plastic and from the polishing slurry, so I need to get a damp paper towel. And wipe the bottom of the mover plate. And the edge of the turntable. Okay, now we're ready to begin the next polishing process. So we get disc number 5 out of the carousel. Disc number 5 should say MD DAC on the back. Place it on the turntable. Lower the mover head, and now I want to take the second doser bottle, right, ID number 5, containing 3 micron diamond particles. Again, swing the bottom out, place the bottle up against the side, straight down to latch it in place, bring the bottom of the bottle back to flush with the top. Put my specimens back on in place. Again, be very careful at this stage not to touch the metal. A little bit more of our green lubricant. (150 RPM, 3 minutes, 15 newtons, water off. Doser level is back to 10 for the new bottle. So again, I need to select the doser level, press enter, use the arrow keys to bring the doser level down to 4, press enter again. So now we have doser number 5. It's recognized the new bottle. The level is set back to 4. And I want to watch the nozzle as I press start to watch for a drop of material. And I did get a drop of material, so we're good to go. All right, one more stage after this. And that's the one that turns it from polished metal into a mirror. Because at that point, the wavelength of red light is about 0.6 microns. Wavelength of like blue light is about 0.4 microns. And we've polished the surface to plus or minus 1 micron. So the surface is flat to only a little longer than the wavelength of light. But it needs to be that flat because when we do the microscopic hardness, right, the indent from the big hardness testers is either 4 to 6 millimeters for the Brunel or about 1 or 2 millimeters for Rockwell. The indent from the microscopic hardness tester is about 40 microns across, which is half the diameter of a human hair. And you need the surface to be flat to an order of magnitude better than the indent. So we need that 1 micron in order for the surface to actually be flat at that scale. Makes sense. But when you're done with the microscopic hardness test, you take the specimen out, you can't see the indents. They're so small you can't see them with the naked eye. You know, if you kind of tilt it around, sometimes you'll catch one of the edges, you know, will catch the light and you'll see a little reflect, you know, a little bright speck if it catches the light just right, but you still can't actually see the indent. Okay. Okay, our second polishing step is done. As you can probably hear, I've already turned on the dryer. Lift the specimen mover head, and once again I'm going to remove the specimens one at a time, rinse each one in turn, and then dry it immediately. So we'll start with the black specimen. Rinse it under flowing water. Rinse it with alcohol and dry it. Take the next specimen off. Rinse it under the water. Rinse it with alcohol and dry it. And the third specimen.
You want to make sure that the water's flowing hard enough to actually wash away any diamond particles, because I don't want to transfer a 3 micron particle onto the disc for 1 micron because it was attached to my specimen. Okay, so now we can inspect our specimens. It's not unusual for the specimens actually to look a little bit cloudy at this stage, just because of the size of the grit. I'm seeing not bad. Maybe not the best specimens I've ever made, but definitely adequate to continue with our process. So again, put the polishing disc directly back into the carousel. Do not rinse it off. And avoid touching the top of the disc if at all possible. Remove the doser bottle. Put it back in its place. And again, I want to get a damp paper towel, wipe the underside of the mover plate and the turntable. Okay, now we're about to do the 1 micron polishing step. I'm actually going to change my gloves for this so that I don't risk contaminating that plate or the specimens with grinding or polishing grit from the coarser levels. The procedure is pretty much the same. Our 6th disc has a almost fuzzy appearance to it, and on the back it says MD Flock, which is the correct disc. So again, spread fingers, lower the disc into place, lower the specimen mover head into place, get the final doser bottle, number 6, containing 1 micron diamond particles. When we're done with this step of the polishing, we will literally have a metal mirror. Swing the bottom out, place the bottle on the side of the head, lower it down to connect it, bring the bottom part of the doser back into line with the top. Place the specimens on. Again, being very careful not to touch the metal surface. One more time, put a little bit of lubricant on, maybe a little bit more than for the previous steps, because this one has again that fuzzy appearance. Again, my settings, 150 RPM, 3 minutes, 15 newtons, water off, doser number 6, level 4. This one actually had the right level at the beginning, so I don't need to change that. I just need to watch the nozzle as I press start to make sure that it dispenses a drop of material, which it did. I really need to replace this disc. It's starting to come loose at the edges.
Losing its
Okay.
surface.
No, not the fuzzy part is coming loose from the magnetic backplate.
Oh, okay.
That's why it looks like the edge is kind of flapping. How bad does that look on camera? You can tell, but it doesn't look too bad. If you don't know what you're looking at, you probably can't tell.
I'll just mute that.
Yeah, I assumed we were actually going to cut out most of the 3 minutes in the middle.
Yeah.
I thought I had ordered another set of these discs, but they haven't arrived yet. Should really check to make sure that the order actually got processed. No, don't start that again. Oh, that might have something to do with it. Somebody changed the setting. It changed it to 10 newtons instead of 15. Okay. So carefully raise the specimen mover head. And again, I'm going to, one at a time, remove the specimens, carry them to the sink, rinse them with water, and then rinse them with alcohol. Okay, so now we can inspect our specimens, again being very careful not to touch the metal surface. And we basically have a mirror. There's a few scratches in the surface that I can see. They're not too bad. And given that the area that we need to work with for these under the microscope is probably about a millimeter square, maybe 2 millimeters square, there's plenty of room on here where we have a really good surface. We can work around the handful of scratches that are still visible. Our green specimen, surprisingly, it was the one that wasn't looking so good at the beginning. It actually looks really good right now. Again, there's a few scratches, but less than on the black specimen. And the red specimen, we still have that divot, same as green. There are some scratches at the very top here. There's a little bit, an area of slightly worse scratches, but again, that's way off at the edge. The center is pretty good. We can definitely work with that. So we'll put away the last doser bottle. And the last polishing disc. Wipe down the turntable and the specimen mover plate one last time. And we are done with our polishing process. At this point, the specimens are ready for etching, but if you are going, you only etch them right now if you are going to look at them under the microscope immediately. If the specimens are going to sit for any length of time, more than a few hours, you don't want to etch them until just before you're actually ready to put them under the microscope to do your metallographic examination.
Hi folks, these were long videos, but then indeed polishing, grinding and polishing takes quite a bit of time, and there are a lot of procedures involved. We have to take utmost care in terms of cleanliness, etc. Now that we have our polished discs, we etch them with 2% nitric acid so that different phases react differently to acid, and they appear therefore differently under a microscope. So here is, for instance, micrographs of 1018 steel we just polished. The left side is at 200 magnification and right hand side is at 500 magnification. So in the next part we are going to talk about these microstructures.